Record on the... Cool. Now I think we're recording.
Yep. The little buttons there.
Yeah.
So when we talked at the summit out in San Jose, there was 3 major features for kubeadm that kind of all wrap in a circle. Self-hosting, upgrades, and HA, right?
Yep.
And what we didn't have resolution on was like each one of those items has a checklist, right? HA has its own checklist, and self-hosting has its own checklist, and upgrades has its own checklist. And what we kind of want to figure out how to do is rationalize what are the pieces of those checklists that can be executed on and delivered in the 1.8 cycle, and who's going to do what, so we coordinate what we're doing. That was the big thing, and people said, yes, we want to help out here, we want to do some of these pieces, but I'm sure everyone's busy right now too. So we can probably link to those individual checklists too. I know I have your checklist for self-hosting somewhere here. That's 172.
Yeah. At least
127 actually.
Yeah.
Then there's the HA checklist, which I have somewhere here.
And yeah.
1 second.
By the way, hi Wojtek.
Hi.
And
Good to see you.
there's an upgrade design proposal too that we should probably link in here, which is, I don't think there's actually an issue for it, but I know that
there is one, but it's like the second one or something. And
yeah.
It was forgotten.
Let me find his actual. I found the doc here.
Yeah. I'm not very familiar with how GCE and GKE does upgrades. Do you have any documentation about that, or?
Wojtek would know.
Yeah.
So for GKE, I'm not aware of any documentation. For GCE, I think we only have this script that is doing upgrades. So we basically don't do HA, more or less.
Yeah.
At the current day, we are working on it, like as Google. But yeah, since we don't really do it, we don't really have also documentation. So
yeah.
I mean, COPS GCE uses just the standard rolling update strategy where we basically bring up new machines with the new versions and shut down the old machines.
Okay, yeah. So it's like the cloud provider, a way that's possible to do for cloud providers, right? Where you have like unlimited machines. More than
certainly designed for a case where you have, it takes advantage of the cloud. Yes.
Yeah, it's like using the auto scaling groups and so forth.
What are you doing with certificates then? Are you reissuing?
Certificates live on S3.
Oh, okay. But they're not tied. You're using like DNS munging to have your new machine come up like your old machine?
DNS, we use DNS to address the masters, yes.
Okay, so then your new machines just as if, me, and me too.
Well, they're just API.cluster name.
Okay.
Or API internal.cluster name.
And GKey is using the Google metadata server, right?
Yeah, from what I know, yes.
Cool. Yeah, so we have a bunch of challenges there to do the same thing without those. But
So
yeah, go on.
there's pieces of the puzzle here on each of these checklists. I don't know if we want to like, I mean, perhaps I can share my screen here.
Feel free to.
1 second.
It isn't.
I haven't started yet.
Yeah, no.
All right, so each one of these items here, self-hosting has pieces that cross over, right? Like be able to deploy 2 schedulers and CMs, right? That's just a replication factor too, but you have self-hosting problems of being able to do one shot, right?
Yeah.
Or do you plan on doing, using daemon sets?
Well, that's the the main question, I think, now, because I honestly don't think we're going to make the scheduling on not ready nodes in 1.7. I hope we do. I really hope, but it might.
That's definitely not happening for 1.7. For 1.8,
1.8. Yeah, I meant. Yeah, so for 1.8. But yeah, so if we get that working, it will be trivial with like replicas 2 and rolling upgrade.
But did you plan on like doing? There's the logistical questions. Do you want to do one-shot upgrade, or do you want to do one-shot scheduling, or do you want to have like a seeded scheduler and then kill it? Because the bootcube mentality, or the like actually implementing the one-shot scheduling, which still is unimplemented.
So, do you mean for when bootstrapping or when upgrading?
Bootstrapping. Upgrading should be trivial.
Yeah.
In this case. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was thinking about upgrading. Well, I don't know. We might be able to work around it by bypassing the scheduler, but it's in 1.8, like creating a binding or something, setting node name on the self-hosted scheduler pod or something. But it seems like it's a little bit hacky and kind of doesn't address the right thing. If we really want to fix the problem, we should like do the scheduling on not ready nodes. But if we like at the same time we really want to ship self-hosting in 1.8, so it's
the workaround would be daemon sets, right? At least for the time being.
Yeah, and
so
is it possible to do a daemon set with 2 replicas?
You do it for all 3. Because there'd be standbys, it wouldn't matter.
Yeah, but like on the same node, is it like possible to
you could submit it, but it would just not do anything. You would say like the daemon set would be supporting master nodes because it would have the master flag, right?
Yeah.
And so long as it has because it supports affinity for daemon sets. Yes, it does. So you should be able to deploy to the masters, and you would basically just spread schedulers across all those masters. And it's not a bad thing, but it's not like, ideally we would want to have like 2 or 3. In this scenario would just do, only one would be active at a time.
Yeah.
So if you started from 0 and you basically said daemon set scheduler with the affinity to the masters, that would get you by and you wouldn't have to worry about the other issue.
Yeah, but I was thinking like if we have a 1 node case, would it be possible to when doing a rolling upgrade of a daemon set, to first add one and then remove one, or is it like the other way around? So is it possible to have the new one added before, so it can schedule like this or are we gonna, like, we're setting the scope now, so are we even thinking about one node cluster, one master clusters for self-hosting in 1.8, or do we like?
I don't think you can truly do self-host. I think it's hokey to do one node self-hosting without, like, the first thing you would need is checkpointing to even say, I want to do one node self-hosting, right? That would be a requirement then. So so I planned on addressing this, and the question that comes up with checkpointing is what granularity of checkpointing, what gets checkpointed, and how much detail we want to store in there. And to me, it was just very rudimentary simple. I don't know if other people have thoughts on it.
Bootkube has, yes, right now it's like one Go file, but at the same time, it shouldn't be hopefully that complex. So to minimize the amount of moving parts we have in the system.
What is the use case for, just stepping back for a second, what is the use case for single node self-hosting? Just easier upgrades?
Yeah, I think so, but at the same time, I was thinking just, well, the user does kubeadm init, we have self-hosting on by default, and he doesn't ever add any more nodes. And then 1.9 comes out and, oh, wow, I want to upgrade my cluster. And there we go. I don't know. It was just like, if we that's the criteria now. I mean, we don't require the user to have any nodes at all. Right now with kubeadm, it's like, do one node if you want, or do hundreds if you want. But I just mean that, are we setting the scope to at least, I mean, to say that, well, this cluster isn't conformant unless it has 3 nodes? Or where are we, like, setting the bar for having a conformant or validated cluster?
Well, right now it would have to be a single node, or single master.
Yeah. Right now that's the minimum. But are we planning to, like, actively push this to 3? I mean, with AJ we do, but
I would like to. Yeah, I would like to, but there's this gets back to the root of why we're having the conversation. It's like, you have these 2 checklists, and in order for you to enable HA in the way HA and self-hosting the way we want it to be, because these 2 features overlap, right?
Yeah.
We're going to have to execute pieces of the puzzle at the same time, right? Like, hopefully that made sense.
Yeah. What Wojtek and Justin, are you familiar with checkpointing and this, like?
So I know what it is, but in this context, like, I'm not sure. But
so
yeah, I'm trying to understand what exactly is happening in this area. So, like,
yeah, cool. Then I'll just say a couple of words on it. Basically, it's like, when we self-host, right now it's like, write some manifest to disk, API server scheduler and controller manager. Once we have those functioning control plane up and running, we're injecting the same manifest into the API server. The API server starts crash looping because it can't bind to the right address, and then we kill the static pod manifests. We delete them in turn and make sure the new self-hosted components are up and running. But and kubeadm can do this right now, and at least it could in 1.6 betas. But then we have the problem that if you restart, if a power cycle or something on the node, when it comes up, the kubelet expects the master to be available, but the master isn't running, and for it to run, it has to be run by the kubelet. So it's like this circular dependency. And so the kind of semi-hacky solution is to checkpoint that manifest. So on the master, a checkpointing agent is always running. And so after the power cycle, the only static pod manifest that exists is the checkpointer. It starts up. It detects that, oh, this pod isn't running as self-hosted, but it should be. As I remember, I have put some state in a checkpointing directory somewhere, and I remember from last time that the API server should be running, and then I inject that as a static pod first, then do the whole thing again, that after the API server static pod is up, it injects to making that self-hosted again. So it's a recovery mechanism, basically.
Okay, sure. So my question is like whether it will be kubelet who is responsible for checkpointing, or it will be like a separate agent.
Right now, ideally it would be maybe the kubelet, but yeah, go on.
It's debatable who would actually own it, whether it be inside of the kubelet or it would be a daemon set agent on the master.
But yeah,
so
we haven't.
It's not yet decided, right? Because I can see advantages of both. So
yeah, so basically there was at some point in time, I think, a proposal like, here's how we could do checkpointing like generic for kubelet. Here's how we could do it without something specific to this use case. But I think it's trended at some point and nobody actually contributed that.
Mm-hmm.
So in the meantime, we're like building this binary, this agent, this Go file that does it for us.
Well, right now it's, I don't know, it's not really checkpointing, right? It's basically just like, it's more like, it's more like, here's what was running in YAML and just spewing it to the ground. And then when it comes back up, it says, oh, I see you spewed some YAML, and then you know, starting those back up again, and then having this like this sort of workflow on startup, which isn't bad. But the notion that we call it checkpointing kind of makes my head twitch, because back in the day, checkpointing and restarting literally meant like, you know, storing register data and all the other goo that comes along with it in an actual full checkpoint.
Yeah, we could definitely like rename it for this cycle. So to just say, this is the scope for the disaster recovery we'd like. And so for like, we could limit the scope for it as well, to say, this is the only thing that needs to be done. The only outcome we want here is being able to reboot, right?
I think that actually helps, because what seems to happen every time people see checkpointing is they think of the full checkpoint, and that's what I usually thought of originally. Yeah. But then I looked at Bootkube and saw some of the pieces of what it's doing and understanding what we need to do from a startup routine. And it's not really checkpointing. It's basically like, it's storing some local state.
Yeah. So if I don't know if we have quorum for this right now, but anyway, we could say that we will, for the 1.8 cycle, we will only focus on disaster recovery when self-hosting, and then like somebody else could work on checkpointing if they'd like to, more generally, and so forth. But we will do this for this cycle, and it will be the thing only required for keeping state between reboots. So we don't lose all state.
Yes.
We could limit it that way and have some pieces less to do.
I don't know if we wanted to build it into the kubelet or if we wanted it to be a static manifest.
I think
Do we
static
have-
manifest right now.
Is there a logical reasoning behind not building it into the kubelet versus just Dominion being able to do it separable and version it independently for a while?
Yeah, I think so. And also, I think if we want to build something into the kubelet for real, it should be the more generic solution, like snapshotting, checkpointing, with all the bells and whistles that have, and all the implications with like writing proposals and thinking about every possible scenario that could ever happen with checkpointing. But by having it out of core, which I really endorse generally, is like we can do what's needed for this use case, and then.
So where should it live then, I guess, is another logistical question. Because this has got to be like if we're prioritizing execution of items, this is definitely one of the highest priority ones to do, and it has to live someplace that can get versioned. Logistics matter. So
I don't know, does Justin or Wojtek have an opinion where it could live? I think the kubeadm repo could be. I definitely think it's a too small item to put in an own repo. It's like to put in the incubator or something. It's like with 2 stars.
Live in the kubeadm repo.
I think it could be in the kubeadm repo. I mean, we're the first consumer, and if
we did this with COPS with like DNS controller, like, and it eventually, like, there are some other DNS controllers, and we're all like merging together into a top level incubator project when it becomes big enough. In this case, it would merge into kubelet when it becomes big enough, I would guess, but
yeah,
nothing
exactly.
wrong with typing it in a holding place and moving it, in my opinion.
That sounds really good to me.
Right.
I have a question though. What is this? Do we want to scope this down to like the things we actually want to solve, like API server and etcd and maybe KCM and scheduler, or do we want to say that because I worry that there are actually edge cases that will mean it's not generic checkpointing. It is checkpointing with
exactly.
a special case for etcd,
Exactly.
checkpointing with a special case for API server.
It's not even checkpointing. It's like that's the thing, is like we should probably have a vernacular that makes sense here, because what all you're doing is like sloughing manifests around, right? that's all we're doing. It's not, we should not call it checkpointing. We should call it like YAML backup, YAML manifest backup, or something like that.
Bootstrapping, something crazy. But yes, whatever. I think we can agree that we can. Joe's good at naming. Why don't we let Joe have naming rights?
Okay,
But is the scope of this basically etcd, API server, KCM, and scheduler? Are those the 4 we care about?
I think so.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, we just basically need, for the local node or whatever it's running on, it needs to know what the manifest is for that machine. Second manifest.
Sorry, what about kubelet?
I'm not going to do checkpointing. You mean like kubelet on kubelet question?
Well, I mean, how do we upgrade?
Oh, it's the upgrade will still be, YAML update your machines or apt-get update. So if you're going to update the local machine, because that's the install upgrade instructions that exist today, you still have to, if you want to upgrade your local kubelet, you still need to yum update your whole cluster and restart, and system control restart, but everything should still be running, right? The workloads still continue to run even though they've been updated.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether that means, this is sort of what we did this is why we punted on this in COPS, right? We're like, well, you have to, if you want to update your OS or you want to update your kubelet, you reboot the machine anyway, or you reboot the machine on on AWS, a reboot is a new instance, so let's not even worry about it. We're just going to always reboot, and we're going to do like hot rebooting later.
Well, this one you can hot reboot and up, or you can hot start a kubelet. So like a kubelet, you can totally update and restart, and that's part of the path of testing. I don't know what it is.
You know, I think, yeah.
I think it is.
But if it's not going to be, are we going to? I think what I've seen people do is they put an annotation on the node, and that controls the kubelet version. Do
you mean kubelet on kubelet?
I'm not doing that. Kubelet on kubelet is a different world. You can't. There's a hell there that I don't want to get into.
I mean,
me neither. So, what was your question, Dustin?
Well, I guess the question is like, so what do we, if we're doing self-hosting, but we're saying it, but you still have to do a different mechanism to update kubelet, then we're not like, what does self-hosting mean? To me, self-hosting means you can upgrade Kubernetes by changing a version, and it rolls out nicely, right?
Yeah.
Yes. I call it self-hosted control plane.
Yeah.
We're doing self-hosted control plane, but not self-hosted, because that is literally impossible with some of the logistics that exist inside of Kubernetes still. So there are literally mount namespace propagation problems. So you need to have.
I'm not saying we should put kubelet in kubelet. But it's like a separate question, which is like, how do we upgrade, or if we can't upgrade kubelet, does it negate what we're doing here with like being able to upgrade kube API server, right?
So
I don't think so, because that's part of the upgrade process is usually upgrade the control plane first and then nodes second.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
so another battle scar. Cops did that, and they added an optional volume mount to the API. The kubelets don't speak that. They don't have the volume. This is for DNS, and so you upgrade. It gets we put a new manifest on there, and none of the kubelets can start the DNS pods anymore because they don't have the optional volume mount. So there were like all these horrific skew issues now.
That breaks.
Yeah. But
that seems
I don't think.
It seems like don't do that. I agree, but yes.
Yeah. But I think that was like more the DNS team somehow that like didn't take skew issues into account more than like I think it violated our policy, right?
It was avoidable. I think it is a there will certainly have to be a test that this works, right? That you can run an old kubelet.
Yeah,
yes.
I think the policy is to from like Kubernetes holistic point of view is like you should be able to run kubelets that are 2 versions older than the control plane. So I mean 1.4 and 1.6 maybe, but preferably 1.5 and 1.6 or 1.6 or 1.7, and I think that's the most common before you upgrade your kubelet. But that, as you mentioned, that was horrific and not good design work from. But I think it's at the same time like affected all.
Yeah, I mean we're all learning this stuff, I think. But yeah, it's just it is we just as long as we have that, we have to make clear that like that is an assumption, and we're going to need a test that makes sure we don't regress on that, I guess.
Yes, that should be an action item.
We have so many. I'm sort of surprised we don't have it, but I don't know. Somehow we don't.
Well, the problem is like we have so many tests that we don't manage them anymore because we're just trying to keep up with the status quo. And it's not necessarily that we have that many tests; it's that we have so many suites that reintroduce the same tests that run it in these weird configurations.
How did you deal with the kube DNS thing in G-key? By the way, do you know, Wojtek? I think you faced the same challenge.
No, I don't know.
Okay, at least from what I understand, one huge upgradable issue with G-key from Mike was like the CA key was thrown away earlier, like after initial generation. So when the CA key was needed for the certificates, like TLS bootstrapping things, they had to come up with some clever logistics there. So I mean, this is also, I think, that we lesson learned. We shouldn't throw away stuff we might need in the future, but it's hard to like plan for these things as well, to know in beforehand. But yeah, definitely need a test for that. Although I think there's a couple of suits that do this, test these queue issues, but I don't know how well they do, how well they test it.
Yep. I think there are, this is like one of the pieces for self-hosting that will be required. And part of self-hosting, in order to do self-hosting the way we want it to, there's got to be high availability to roll things forwards, right? Because then you get the rolling update of your control plane. Otherwise, if you have single node self-hosting, you get into this weird edge case of upgrades, right? You literally force checkpointing to work the stuff.
Kubernetes will be upgraded in the way they were installed. And that means we're not doing
so we still have
kubelet.
Yeah. I don't think anyone's doing, no one's doing that because they shouldn't be.
No, because of host path can't mount, can't use volume propagation shed. So
Yeah.
basically it all breaks. Or it's actually by setting privilege, you can like NS enter into the host again, but
yep. See,
then
you want to,
it's a mess, because then you lose all benefits of being in a container. So I mean, on CoreOS, SoCat wasn't installed, for example, so everything broke again.
So I mean, literally other systems do this. Like, we actually did these things on Condor like years ago when the namespace sharing originally came out. But we have a third person. So there's the node, which is the kubelet, but there was a third party that did the unshare and managed that space. And because there was a third intermediary, you could do infinite recursion, because all the daemons that were managing all had to talk to the intermediary.
Yeah. So cool. I think, so now we've defined the scope. Self-hosted in this context means self-hosted control plane. And the control plane will be upgraded before nodes. And we need at least, we might have a test, but we need more or better quality or whatever. And kubelets will be upgraded the way they were installed. So right now it's from packages. So it will be apt-get upgrade or YAM updates.
My plan tentatively has been the packages that exist from the release process are binary thunks, and I have already put in PRs, and I'm going to put in more PRs on the release repository, so they're actually legit packages. And I'm also talking with the Debian folks to do it on the other side. So I still have all my packager ACLs, even though I don't work for Red Hat anymore. So I can build and produce packages for Apple and Fedora. So
cool. And then with checkpointing, we have or checkpointing that isn't checkpointing anymore.
We should not call it checkpointing.
Yeah, YAM backup or power cycle, disaster recovery, or whatever. One conclusion is to rename and reduce the scope here, and we'll put the code in the Kubedian repo under this period of staging, right? Then we have issues deploying the scheduler, and should we say that if we don't solve this, we'll just do the daemons way? I mean, we lost a lot of time in this cycle because of this. Wojtek, have you been involved in this? I think you're familiar with this scheduling and these tolerations and.
Merrick was.
Yeah, I was like, I roughly know what was going on there, but yeah.
So
I'm not sure what exactly your problem here is.
What is the issue? I'm not familiar with it.
Okay, so on a high level, it's like we have these static pods. The control plane is up and running. Everything's fine. We delete the API server. It comes up self-hosted, but still our node, we don't have any network. We're using the CNI network plugin, and so we don't have any network set up for like the pods. We can only use host networking, right? But
right.
And that's not normally an issue. We're working around it. I mean, the network is a host network through, and the scheduler and the controller manager are host network through. Everything's fine, but the problem is that CRI and its predecessor, when the CNI networking isn't there, it's starting to report node not ready status, and then the scheduler omits all those nodes for scheduling. So problem is when we inject the scheduler deployment from a static pod to a real deployment, the scheduler will the static pod scheduler will look for a node to place the self-hosted scheduler, but it filters out all nodes that are not ready, which is the only one we have is not ready, and
right.
Then we fail we're deadlocking in a state where we don't have any nodes to schedule.
The problem is, so that like if it's a pod, it works. If it's a static pod, it works because a kubelet will run a pod without this network true. But
exactly.
This,
but when we're going,
schedule a pod, yeah.
Okay. And we might be able to like work around this with bindings and so forth, or just using daemon sets, which bypass all these things. But we should have a workflow diagram for sure.
No one outside of this conversation will understand what the heck is going on.
Yeah, so that's also an issue but the proposed real solution for this is to first of all make a condition that the CNI networking or networking on this node isn't ready. This is a condition we should have. Then all conditions should be replicated in taints. So when we have a faulty taint like network not ready or whatever, something disk pressure, the node controller will create a taint for that to match that condition. And then there's also this no execute, what is it called? Operator, I think.
Yes.
So then the workload can choose to like, do I tolerate the network being ready? This would be the case with the scheduling, with the scheduler itself.
A part of me, there's two parts to me to this, right? Like there's the just get it done, which says yes. Then there's the good design principle, well thought out state machines part of me that says, oh my God, because the state machine for the kubelet is not well defined and is implicit versus explicit, right? And it makes no sense to me why this wouldn't be an explicit state, because you shouldn't be in a network. I mean, there's a couple of conditions that you can get into for how it occurred, but it seems like an actual state, right, of the node, of the kubelet itself. So why wouldn't you just have a pot or a node status be network not ready, right, versus node not ready, right? And if you had network not ready, there's nothing that prevents you from doing a scheduling for network not ready, right?
Yes.
I would guess the argument is that's what taints are going to be. Is that right?
Yeah.
No,
So
it's not an explicit state then, because then it's a condition, and then you're adding all these bits on conditions. Right?
no,
Because there's a whole bunch.
Yeah. So I was proposing that we're using taints as this mechanism. The conditions are just there for legacy reasons, right? Or
Yeah, the conditions are dead. The conditions
yeah,
are.
yeah. They're
They're
just version 1 API, and like we have to keep them, but we won't use them. So I think we should just use taints and tolerations, but well,
You could taint the node, right? And then you'd still have to, but you'd have to add that logic into the node, and you have to get sign off from the node team.
Yeah.
So that's the scary part, is because they're always overbooked.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I don't think, even though we really try, this is going to require coordination from the node team, from the network scheduling, and from the cluster lifecycle team. So it's like 4 SIGs in one effort.
This may be why you asked this before, but was this what you were asking about the daemons? Yeah, daemon set with master affinity. Yeah, so that works. I mean, it's also closer to the configuration that is tested. So
what do you mean?
well, like the configuration we test is the masters run every component. They run API server, they run scheduler, they run KCM, and they each run an etcd. So if every change you make from that is going to be like another month of testing.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, so you mean that running the scheduler and control manager in static a daemon set isn't a problem, right?
Right, but running as a deployment where the deployment like might not be on every master, then you like have to like, you've introduced something you have to test. Like, what if we have more nodes than we have the count, and you have scheduler on one node and KCM on another and API on a third, and then that's a whole bunch of test scenarios, which
so
I would say is not worth it. I think etcd might well be worth that month, but I don't think KCM and scheduler are worth it.
I think with etcd, you could active passive the operator, and the operator could just do its magic, right? Once it sees that there's more nodes available.
Yeah,
It's going to be, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to test.
Yeah, I see your point. I think one of the motivations for using a deployment where like we can always be sure that there are 2, even if we have 1 node. But if we have like, and one of them will be active, one will be passive. But if we have 5 masters, then we will have like 4 passive and 1 active. I don't know exactly if that's a problem, but it's a problem in the 1 node scenario where we want to upgrade, but we have only 1 scheduler for. Yeah, I don't know.
So it seems to me like we're starting to get into HA questions now.
Yeah,
because this is where this is exactly why I said like these 3 features are in a circle, right? Like they all depend upon. Actually, I don't even know if it's like a cross diagram where everything depends upon everything else.
Yeah, but
I think we can absolutely execute self-hosted bits in the 1/8 cycle to get most of them in place, or if not all of them in place, right?
Okay, so can we draw a conclusion of that? We'll start with using a daemon set.
I think so.
If I mean both what I can Justin were on board with that, and it's line with Cheeky and Cops, right? Is it?
Cops doesn't yet use a daemon set, but yeah, we're getting there. The other advantage of a daemon set is scheduling is easier. So if we had to like bypass the scheduler and do a manual schedule, we could do it. We wouldn't have any issues about like, are we actually scheduled on this node? Because we know that if we are a master, we can schedule a daemon set locally.
True. Yeah, but
I'm not saying we should rewrite the scheduler, but I'm saying like it might make that not checkpointer a lot easier, because we don't have to deal with like, should I be running this? If there's a daemon set and we match the node criteria, we should be running that pod.
Yeah.
Like that is
one.
Nice.
Yeah.
I mean, if we want to, like, we can hijack the scheduler for special purposes. Like I can make that happen, right? and I can get buy-in there because it's a one-shot thing, right? So as long as the arguments have been specified for one shot, then that's totally fine. It's the weird state where trying to get buy-in from the other side of putting all the taints in place, that requires an act of Congress, which is no fun.
I'd say it seems like we're holding an agreement that if we say we were doing a daemon set just for right now,
yeah,
and then we can continue with everything else and loop back to it and see like, did that make our lives harder or did it make it easier, right?
I think that seems like a reasonable approach, because like we can do a yay or nay mid-cycle, right?
Yeah, I think. Go on.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, say one.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it's, even if we do the daemon set now, we can change it in the future. It's not that like it will completely close our doors.
Sounds good.
This is orthogonal, but I wanted to mention it while I thought about it, because we're adding more manifests to the massive manifest blog that is inside the code. Do you have any opinions about like using bin data inside of kubeadm so that we can just break out the manifests, do like a directory structure of manifests and just smash it in with bin data?
I have an opinion on this, which is we did that in COPS and it was a huge mistake. Let's not do that. It's the code.
What?
Go is actually just so much nicer. And I think actually Chris gave a talk about this, about like our move from manifests. So it turns out users, well, as it's in bin data anyway, end users can't really edit it. They have to build it. So that argument is sort of not there. Code just seems to be once you start doing any templating in there, code just gets so much nicer to work with than this. And I think like KSonnet is like part of the same argument, right?
Well,
like,
I think the difficulty though is for someone coming into the code base that like just knows the pieces of the puzzle but doesn't necessarily know kubeadm. They're like, where the hell is my thing that I need to tweak for just this one bit, right? So they're like walking through the code to figure out where all the manifests are, and once they understand it, it's structured and makes sense. But that's just it's a learning curve versus like just editing a file which they know is right there.
I agree in theory. I think we can achieve, this is just like my COPS experience, which is we can achieve some of that by having a single function which generates each manifest that then pulls in data. So like templating in code. But it once you start having more than a couple of little substitutions, and sort of like the Helm charts sort of feed into that, there's nothing in the Helm charts anymore, right? It is just like references to other references. Like,
my meta thing, which like then generates itself, right?
Exactly. Once you achieve a certain level of maturity, it's like there's nothing left you lost your initial goal. And at least with Go, you can like open an ID and track back through the variables.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think for now we could just document this. I mean, it's an ongoing, never-ending effort to make things more user-friendly. But I also think that the phases, like idea that we'll have one phase that generates the control plane. I mean, API server scheduler and controller manager manifest. That's just one, and you can skip that phase if you want to generate them yourself or whatever.
How does this sound? Because this plays onto my point, which is originally, as we start to churn on these ideas and get them in place, every major churn needs to have like a document PR with it, so we don't end up at the end of the cycle, you know, trying to justify and explain things to other people. Because if it's all in the docs as we update the phases of what kubeadm will do, it will become apparent, like, this is where the code is, this is what it does in this phase, right?
Yeah, I think
it's extra overhead, but I think it'll be worthwhile.
Yeah, and that's in parallel of this, as a fourth item, I think, I mean, we could even like write it down here, is the phases stuff. I mean, do we think that we can do these three things without at the same time really defining what kubeadm does and when? I mean, right now I've defined it as certificates where we're generating 10 files or something, then kubeconfig files, and then spitting out the manifests for the control plane, and then everything after is post-install, like add-ons. And self-hosting itself is actually a post-install thing that can be done with just inputs, with just the manifest, static pod manifest as the input, right? So, I mean, once we have a clear structure of this, it's like, I mean, should it, or do we agree that it really, we should have the, along with the other design documents, which we will check into Markdown, into GitHub, we'll have the phases proposal ready and done before we write any code. Because I think that will end up being much more clear and will be easier to justify to other people. And at the same time, get some comments from others to chime in on document, not code.
Yes, I agree. It's going to be harder. We have to have discipline here.
Yeah.
Right? Of who's going, because I mean, who's going to execute on this besides you and me? Like, we need to be able to divvy up pieces of this too along the way, ideally, because right now we have like, what astonishes me about this SIG versus other SIGs is that people show up to other SIGs and they're like, I'm ready to work, give me work, right? Like scheduling is an example. Like IBM shows up and they're like, yes, give me all the work I can handle, right? But we have like 30 people on a call, and you know, Lucas's one-man show burning down the house, right? And you know, now I'm explicitly tasked with working on this, so that's fine. I'll help you out. But I'd like to be able to get a little more granularity, and that's part of the reason why we're talking now, to be able to divvy up some of the tasks, so it's not, you know, you can go on a break and kubeadm doesn't like fall over, right?
Yeah,
we have some trust.
We know what happened with the 1.7 release, right?
Yeah, exactly, right? So discipline is part of the process for the phases bit, but I think as we start to, you have your checklist there, and I think we should modify and update the checklist for self-hosting.
Yeah.
So that way it can, like, we can break up pieces, be like phase 1, phase 2. I know Jordan's really good at that, actually. So like whenever he does a large checklist, he breaks it into phases.
Yeah, sounds good. I wrote here that we'll go hand in hand with other three proposals / features.
Is phases a internal code work structuring and documentation, or is it that you expect other tools like COPS or GKE and KubeApp to use portions of phases?
Both. So initially, I hope it's just a documentation effort. I mean, what we're gonna have time for in 1.8 is like, I guess it's mostly documentation, getting the like bits right, getting the code like somehow structured. I mean, in 1.4 and 1.5, we've got like this kind of code, and right now in 1.6 it got better, but as you mentioned in some issues, there was still Justin, there was still
and I'm happy to work on those with you. But like from the COPS point of view, we're not necessarily going to use the phases. We're going to try to go lower level.
I hope it's going to be the phases as well for external integration. Like, I mean, certificates, for example. COPS maybe want to use a different CA or whatever, or you want to generate everything by yourself or get them from S3, I don't know. and then you can just, every phase should be independent. And this means that you can just generate everything in beforehand, and Kubernetes will pick that up. This is already working from 1.6 release, but it should go for everything else. Or you can just skip the phase and like do it yourself. But we still have this clearly defined input and output of everything. And I think this becomes even more crucial, especially for documentation justification for these self-hosting AJ and upgrades things. So, I mean, first internal, I think, but gradually, I hope it will get into like COPS integration or whatever, that you can run add your bells and whistles on top. Right, but in the end, it's really simple. After all, it's certificates, kubeconfig files, static pod manifest files, and then just some extra source with bootstrap tokens and add-ons. So
yeah, I mean, it's just a question of whether it was if it's for your own purposes, then you should, it feels like because it's primarily initially for your own purposes, you should do it whatever makes most sense for you that is coding, right? If it's gonna slow down the things which are probably the real deliverables that end users will care about, which are self-hosting upgrades and HA, then maybe focus on those. Yeah,
but at the same time, I'm worried whether we're gonna ship those if we don't have proper
right. So, like if it's a requirement for that, then that makes sense.
Yeah, it's anyway. Let's go on to AJ.
Well, I want to do we want to? Here's a time check. So we're an hour in. Do we want to power through this, or do we want to take one step at the puzzle, and which is really nearly tackled one of them, and then reconvene at another time? Because we can continue this sort of interim meetings till we get an execution plan, and we can re-break down the task items and even start executing on pieces of it. And then as we reconvene, we can be like, okay, well, we found these pieces that were done, these pieces are not done.
To me, it makes sense to reconvene, and partially because of what you just said, but also because I would suggest the next one to tackle might be upgrades. And I think I'd love to have someone from Bootcube here, because that to me is the sort of how you recover from a failed upgrade is the problem. And that's where it gets really interesting. And I don't know if Bootcube folk are the people to ask or someone else.
We don't have things like what Aurora has, which is the cleanly rollback facilities on conditions.
Well, yeah, you say that, but then we have our not checkpointer, right? So maybe we do have that, right? If that was sort of one of the points about the checkpointer not being generic is, if it turns out we need to do special cases, we can do special cases for those 4 components, right? And etcd, we say, etcd is a huge special case, and we're going to etcd operator that. And then but maybe we have special cases for the other guys as well.
Yeah, I mean, well, here's the conundrum that goes on in my head is I want to have an Uber controller. The controller that controls the controller, right? You can go all the way down, right?
I mean, this is, yeah, look, I mean, I totally agree with you. And that's what COPS is, right? I mean, COPS is exactly that controller. It's that, it turns out at the end of the day, the COPS is you need to upgrade your OS. And so that's what COPS does, right? At the same time, it upgrades this Kubernetes thing, but like that's sort of how it works.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool, but I think it's out of scope for KubeADM itself.
Well, but I mean, what if KubeADM was that mega controller, right? Or bottom controller?
Well, I think KubeADM's purpose would be like start the mega controller, right? It'd be like lay down all the bits, start the mega controller.
This may be semantics at this point, but yes.
Magic.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that it would certainly be within the purview of the KubeADM project to produce that mega controller if a mega controller was desired.
Yeah, but I don't want to go there yet. Baby steps. I think getting the pieces in place and then continually reevaluating as we get the pieces of the puzzle in place makes sense, because we have known knowns and we have unknown unknowns. So let's do the things we can right now, and then eventually over time, get the grand city on the hill, if that's possible.
We could name the checkpointer KubeADM controller. Just in anticipation.
You see, like, you shouldn't do that when I'm drinking something.
I was just mind. You just like you asked for it.
So upgrades. If we just say one thing about upgrades, is it that we'll do it the controller way, not the CLI way? I think we all agree on this.
What is the CLI way? What is the controller way? Oh, you mean it's not like a package?
Yeah. So basically, do we want to build it into KubeADM the CLI way? That KubeADM orchestrates everything from client, or do we want to make a server-side in-cluster running thing that's generally usable and that consumes like a resource of TPR or whatever that's getting the information like this basic spec and state. So I think we want the spec and state thing to be able to evolve. I mean, it could be a partial upgrade as well. I mean, it says in spec that, well, update, the end goal should be control plane this, daemon set this, kubelets this. And
let's table this one, because we want to get more people involved in this conversation. I'm sure other people will be interested in, like Justin mentioned, because we're already an hour in.
Yeah.
And we have enough stuff to do pieces and execute and reevaluate. So why don't we table this one, and if you want to set up a time for next week, we can do it after cluster lifecycle meeting. We can do bi-weekly things until we have these pieces in place. That's fine with me. So like Friday works for me. This time works for me.
Yeah.
Let's see who else joins before we say we're all east of California. But let's. Especially with Wojtek. Like, what time is it? What time is it there?
It's not too bad. 9 p.m. So,
yeah, they run pretty late. They actually shift their hours on purpose.
Oh, and it'd be 8 for Wojtek or 9.
It's 9 p.m. for me and Wojtek. So.
Is it sunny outside?
Yeah, it's really sunny.
I thought it was a myth, this whole 6 months of sunshine. I guess it's not.
We have sun until 1 o'clock.
That's the real scheduler thing. We should we should have releases where it's sunny for Lucas, and releases.
Yeah.
This explains productivity and lack of productivity during.
Yeah, it's sunny until 1 o'clock, and then the sun comes up 3 o'clock. So it's.
Oh my goodness.
But on the other hand, it doesn't come up at all during the winters. Mostly. So we
all
get
right.
But I think we were pretty productive this hour.
I actually have I had to stand up for the first like 15 minutes, but I can skip it next week or next time, I think, if we conflict again.
Yeah, I think 15 minutes later would actually work perfect for
Mine
me.
was actually at 1:15 our time, but
Well, it doesn't matter. I mean, let's just use the list and we can figure out, right?
exactly.
It's 15 or 30 minutes or whatever. So
I say just do it and see what we can put up a straw man, see what people can cancel, and go from there.
Yeah,
sounds good.
sounds good.
All right. I will actually start digging into the checkpointings, the not checkpointing stuff now or soon. And I'll probably have some status update by next week.
Okay, cool. So is it like, are you gonna dig into code directly and just, send a PR against the Kubernetes repo with some...
Well, I'm not going to get that far yet. I'm going to dig into bootkube's details to figure out what exactly needs to get done in this stage, right? So I'm going to dig deep into bootkube because I already started digging in there and figure out what exactly we need for this, if we need even that much, right? And also validate how we want to deploy. So that alone will keep me busy for a little bit.
Yeah, cool. And then like the step after that is moving the actual code, building an image and like pushing so we can consume it in Kubernetes.
Yeah, and we'll do that in a separate repo so we don't have to do we can churn way faster. We don't have to deal with all the other issues that come along with it.
Yeah, sounds good to me. I'm gonna try to ping Jacob today again to make sure we have some quota, and I'd like to see the Kubernetes job go green. It's been red for a week or something.
Yeah,
but,
I saw that. They've run out of money for them to run their tests.
So we'll see how that goes. And yeah, I hope to be able to update the what is called the phases proposal, something to outline with keeping this in mind. So
okay,
sounds like a plan. Cool.
Happy Friday.
Yep.
Happy Friday.
Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Same.
Bye.